My name is Simon Duffy. I'm the Director of the Centre for Welfare Reform and the Chair of Citizen Network. And this talk is being hosted by Citizen Network, and the recording will be put on the Citizen Network webinar page. I've put the link in the chat bar. There's already some recordings about neighbourhood democracy up there, and lots more interesting resources if that's useful. This is, I think, maybe our fourth webinar on the theme of neighbourhood democracy. And although I don't know we've finally settled on neighbourhood democracy is the right term, but we're still struggling to find a better term anyway. And by neighbourhood democracy, what we mean is really neighbourhoods are the kind of small local units where people can live together and meet together and do things together. So kind of small human scale. And by democracy, we mean really the original Greek meaning. So people power, people having power in their lives and people coming together to have power. So we don't really mean politics as it's typically understood today, which often feels like the opposite of democracy in its true meaning. But this is an exploration of how, the project is an exploration of how we can make some kind of really significant shift of power back to local communities, how we can get people able to think together, talk together, make decisions together, work together at a truly local level. There are lots of really interesting things going on around the world, and Citizen Network hopes to support and share learning around the world. But I suppose it's a recognition also that in many places, particularly in the United Kingdom, where today's stories will come from, it feels like there's really been very little attention, certainly by the powerful, to the local level. That many of the structures that you might expect to exist don't exist, and that we haven't really fully adopted the habits of everyday citizenship or the kind of social and political arrangements that make everyday citizenship easy and natural. So we've kind of got to learn how to do some of this stuff. And on our journey, we've been very inspired and very lucky to have Angela join us in several of these conversations and helping us think about the idea of neighbourhood democracy and linking us to her own community in Wigan, but also in Sefton, or work that she's done in Sefton. So we're going to hear from Angela and Jill and Dave, who are going to talk us through some of their learning about how community action takes place. Remember, we should have time for questions. We've got at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end, but it's useful to type questions in as we go as well, so that the participants and the speakers can maybe have a look at those questions and think about them as we go. I think that's everything. I hope I've not forgotten anything. Just normal, I think almost everybody has muted themselves already, so I won't do anything different, but yes, try and stay muted until there's a need to speak. Angela, would you like to start the ball rolling?
Yeah, I will do, and thank you for inviting us to come and share our stories, really, and sharing stories about two neighbourhoods. One, Springfield in Wigan, that's where I live, and that's the story of our mutual aid and how we've come together to support each other. So there's myself and Jill who are going to talk about that, and hopefully Dave, but he's not joined us yet, so he might not be joining us. And then the village of Netherton, about 10,000 people there in Sefton on Merseyside, and that's about how a community has led the response to the pandemic, supported by an alongside organisation. And Debbie and Chris are going to talk about that. And I suppose the connection between those two places, as Simon has just said, is it's one place where I've lived and another place is where I've kind of been involved with and become a friend of since about 1997. So Springfield, I'll start with, where I live, and this is some of the context to it, is just before lockdown, we were having some conversations with our local council, around developing asset-based community development locally. And my kind of reason for that was centred around a growing sense of division that I could feel, and a bit of a dismantling of democracy where I lived, you know, and particularly communities where I live were feeling a lot more divided since the Brexit vote. And I was also really interested in looking at how we could maybe kind of explore cooperatives and community wealth building and keeping some of the money that was being extracted out of our town back into the town. So I was signposted to Made in Wigan, because we have got a Power to Change project within our town, a few neighbourhoods away from where I'm living. And Dave, if he does join us, will kind of talk a little bit about that. So that was the context before we started. And then on Friday the 13th of March, my partner and I decided to invite people in the street where I live, 43 houses, to see if they wanted to join together. And if you remember at this time, kind of this was the period when kind of panic buying was just about starting. And, you know, older people in our community were getting a bit worried about whether there'd be any food left for them at all on the shelves. So we put this invite through to kind of either come together as a WhatsApp group or have a phone list as well, and see if we could support each other. So it was very much about kind of mutuality, you know. We weren't coming along as looking for people who needed helping because they were vulnerable. We were kind of trying to say we're all valuable together. And so everyone was invited in to join in. And then once we'd got kind of people invited in, we started to look together at how people were already connected, you know, whether people were connected to family members or whether they had people who were already caring for them, and whether who we all knew, because we all knew some people, but we didn't know everybody. And we had quite a number of grown-up children ringing us up, feeling so grateful really that they knew that if they become ill, somebody would kind of look after the parent for them or get there. And we had like Alice across the road, who's 5, who wanted to buddy up with Mr. Unsworth, who's much older than 5, further down the street, because they had a good friendship from kind of looking after each other with school. So we kind of made sure that we knew that everybody was connected. And then we had a look at what we'd got. So we had like 3 nurses in the street, a baker, a builder, an electrician, a singer, a dancer, a guitar player, a drummer, a doula, an end-of-life doula. So we worked out that we practically had everything that we needed in our street. You know, we could kind of run ourselves. And then I bumped into, online, because we weren't bumping about in the streets much, a woman called Emma, who had set up Springfield Supporters, and it's now got about 610 members, but at that time it didn't have so many. And Emma liked the idea of inviting people in to do things together. And so between the 13th and the 20th of March, 76 streets had an invite from a neighbour, and then 112 streets in total before we went into lockdown. And Emma offered people who'd set up a street group to become part of another group, a champ group, if they wanted to, through WhatsApp. And there was also the opportunity to meet each other on Zoom, you know, to say hello, so we could all see each other's faces, given that we were going to be kind of working alongside each other over the coming months. And we learned how important it was to for somebody who lived on that street to issue the invitation rather than somebody who lived on a neighbouring street. So, for example, I did another couple of streets with an invite and people didn't join in as much. But interestingly enough, I still get phone calls. So I had somebody ring me 2 nights ago who were wanting a bit of support. But it seemed to be that people were much more kind of willing and able to join in when it was a neighbour that was inviting them to join in. And I'm just going to let Jill, who's here, kind of speak a little bit about her experience, if you're ready, Jill, and you would like to.
Yeah. So I I remember seeing Angela's post about the invitation that she'd sent to her neighbours, and what I really liked about the way that it was written was that it was inviting them to kind of be a part of something. It wasn't saying, I'm here to do something. It was, you know, shall we all just get together? And I really liked that, because I saw others that were a little bit more kind of helper and needed. So I amended them, and me and my 10-year-old son went out one night and posted leaflets around our street. And as we were walking around, we realised that there was 4 cul-de-sacs as well, and we didn't want to just leave it without doing them, because we felt like they were all part of the same thing. So I remember feeling quite apprehensive, really, because I've lived on this street for 15 years, and the only people I really speak to are one side of my neighbours. So I wasn't really sure how people would respond to some stranger, in effect, pushing a note through the door. But by the time I got home and we'd done half the streets, I already had about 6 messages of people saying, wow, this is a really good idea, thank you so much. It's, you know, some comments, I've lived here 20 years and I don't know anybody on the street, we just keep ourselves to ourselves. In the end, we've got 48 participants currently in our street group, and I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking I can't actually imagine not having that street group now, because it's so integral in our everyday lives of communicating as a unit, really, about things that are going on and things that are happening. And I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of people that I've met through this process. So there was a message from a lady called Katriana, who moved over from Poland and had been based in London for about 12 months. She'd moved up with her young son, who was 5, and didn't know a single person within the street. So obviously, as we went into lockdown, it became very, very isolating for her. The language was a little bit of a barrier, but also for her son as well. As an only child, he really did struggle with it. And since then, it's moved on a little bit. And my 5-year-old has been together, and they've celebrated the birthdays, physically distanced, but you know, socially connected. So that's been really lovely, because my little boy's now got a friend in the street, which he didn't have. I also got a message from Dave, who had recently had a stem cell transplant, so he was shielding completely, and his wife and daughter were just moving out to stay away from him because they were still having contact with people. And we actually got talking, because one of my friends was diagnosed in December, and it was coming up to the phase of having that, and he offered to be that support and that connection for her, as somebody that had been through that experience, and wanted to offer that. And that's something that I think the theme that will come through this is that even those that were deemed to be vulnerable and shielding actually had an awful lot to give, and are still giving to support other people. The other one is May, is an elderly lady at the end of the street who has Alzheimer's, and she tends to go for walks, especially when it's been a nice day. So we had quite a few nice days at the start of lockdown, and again, that has now become a kind of community approach to that. So there's a lot more people involved. We've made contact with neighbours, with carers. We're all kind of looking out for it, whereas before it fell to one neighbour to do that, and now the whole street and the whole community are actually doing that and supporting, and ensuring that, you know, she's safe and looked after and things like that. And then on top of that, some of the things that have really resonated, obviously we did a bit of physically distanced celebrating a V-Day. We have had many exchanges of things. So I got 2 new internal doors for a bottle of wine. We've got Ben, the bee enthusiast, who very, very kindly offered to provide all the children within the community with a DIY make your own bug house kit. So that was great. And we've raised money for the RSPCA. We do a book swap, so we leave books on the shelves on the end of the drive for people to take. And as a street, we have come together and written to councillors and got involved with the school and the local council about some antisocial behaviour and some things like fly tipping and off-road motorbikes being used. And as a community, we've really found our voice. You know, we've all been able to contribute to it in a way, rather than kind of probably sitting in our house and whinging about it to ourselves. We've all joined together and started some real positive action around that and provided some solutions for that, which I think is key going forward. And that's
Very
about
much,
it. I think. Have I missed anything else?
I don't think so. I think you've kind of covered a
lot.
So
we're just more connected. You know, we've recycled so much more. You know, people have been, instead of taking things to the tip, they've been given extra leases of life. We've just come together in every way possible, and I could never have imagined that would have happened just from pushing a note through a door.
Yeah. And it's kind of, we really did try and keep it very much a street approach, so that each street looked after each other, because we felt that helped with safeguarding, you know, and helped to keep it really local. And money exchange too, you know, if there was a need for money exchange. And we kind of had this approach that if, you know, just trust your neighbours and trust yourself. And if you don't feel like you can trust, then come to the wider group. And then if the wider group doesn't feel that it can trust, we could go to the council emergency line. So we tried to keep it as local as possible. And then some neighbours within each of the streets also offered to help in other streets where maybe those streets weren't as well connected. And there was no kind of pressure for people to join in. They just had a phone number. Everybody in our 112 streets had a phone number at least, or could join in a Facebook group if they wanted to. And right at the start, we kind of contacted our council area manager to ask them would they like wrap something around us, you know, so that we could go to them if we needed more than neighbourliness. But it kind of didn't work as we hoped for, and we tried to get them to refer to us, anybody who came in through the council emergency system, just so that we could include them in some of the other community activities that we had, but we kind of didn't really get to develop that much. And we noticed at the beginning, you know, there was there was a lot in relation to neighbours thinking they needed permission. Are we allowed to help each other out? And that was particularly difficult when there was the kind of big scale recruitment for volunteers and people feeling that they had to go and become a volunteer for an organisation rather than help their own neighbour out. And trust too was a bit of a difficulty. So for example, because we were new, like we didn't have a bank account or anything, but I've got my own business. So we wanted to see if the councillors would let us have a bit of money for the Brattleboro money for food. And they gently persuaded us not to apply for it because we didn't have a bank account. So I underwrote any money that we would potentially lose through buying people anything, and I lost 0 pence in doing so. And I wrote a blog at the time about it, you know, because it felt like the emergency machine came in so quickly that it was difficult for neighbours to find the space to build, and we had to keep talking to people and asking them to back off, really, you know, and just give us a little bit of space to let it grow. We eventually all found our way, and we've still got ongoing conversations about it. And because we were kind of hoping in a longer term picture of like community building, really, we tried to build that into from the start. So we had an online coffee morning practically from the first couple of weeks in, and it's been really well used by people who have had to stay indoors. We've helped people get online you know, if they needed to. We have a mindfulness group. I teach mindfulness, so I kind of offered that as a gift to my community because it's really helped me to practice with people throughout the time. And a nurse actually wrote us a letter who'd participated in it. She'd been having to stay at home because she was recovering from cancer, and she'd recently been invited back into a work kind of online group, and had noticed the difference with her own stress levels and feelings about being at home in comparison to her colleagues. And she felt that was very much around the coffee morning and the mindfulness group. And then we tried to also, Dillis in my street, who's 93, she was kind of on my list to say hello to. But she told me she didn't want anybody to say hello to her. She wanted to say hello to other people. She wanted to help out. So we worked across the patch to connect people with similar interests, to keep each other company and to make friends. We also did as much as we could to support local businesses in our area. And that's really grown actually now, Small Business Sunday, where businesses promote each other and offer each other support. And we kind of constituted ourselves. So Springfield supporters became Springfield and Beach Hill community because we want to do more, really. We've been community building on Zoom and doing safe street conversations and just asking questions like, what do you love about Springfield? What are you passionate about? And what would you be interested in getting involved with others? And we've got 6 or 7 little themed groups that have developed now. Karine and Emma really want to ensure that everyone in Springfield has a friend. So they're wanting to develop kind of ways in which people can connect. There's a huge history, interest in local history, food pantry, growing and gardening, a football club. A woman in our community has got the skills and is going to set up a children's football club. Fixers, you know, so there's a lot of little themed programs that are coming through it. And this is what we've noticed really, is that, you know, people aren't burnt out in our neighbourhood. There's no heroes. You know, there's just lots of neighbours who've all been doing the bit, supporting 2 or 3 other people. There's been a real, as Jill has said, I mean, this has been shared through every one of our street groups around how people are caring for each other more on their own streets, particularly where people might be living with dementia or living with Alzheimer's or towards their end of life or have carers coming in. There's a real increase in that. A huge increase in giving, exchanging, sharing and lending all across the board. That's been massively. And our council has noted that through coronavirus, their emergency referrals, our neighbourhood has got lower, much lower referrals than any other similar areas in our town. And they reckon that's because of the neighbour to neighbour mutuality approach that we've adopted. So that's Wigan, and I don't think Dave's joined us, has he? And Dave, you know, what we're hoping to do is carry on building this and growing and linking with Dave, who's got the Made in Wigan Power to Change money for creating small social enterprises, so that we can, you know, grow and get involved in rekindling both democracy and creating some little businesses.
Dave is here, actually. He's put a message in. In fact, I can see him there.
Is he here, Dave?
I'm here.
Yeah, do you want to say something, Dave, about Power to Change?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was struggling to get on to be right. Yeah, no, thanks for that, Angela. It was really fascinating to see what you're doing. Amazing, really. Yeah, the Power to Change for everyone who...
Dave, sorry, can you speak a bit closer to your microphone or something? You're a little bit muted.
I'll move my computer a bit. Sorry, I'll move it forward. Can you hear me better?
A little bit. You're still a bit quiet.
Right, okay. I'll try and get me. Can you hear better now?
A little bit.
I need to Trying to figure out how I can turn my volume up on the screen.
It's the input volume
now?
on your microphone.
We can't see you neither, Dave.
What's that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, you can. You're a whisper, Dave.
All right, okay. Right, I'm muted.
In fact, you seem to be becoming more whispery.
Yeah.
But if you look at your preferences on the audio side, there should be a way of increasing the sensitivity of your microphone.
Can you hear better now?
Oh yeah, that's better.
Right, sorry.
Yeah. We've got a couple of minutes, Dave, before we need to run down to our over 20 friends in Liverpool.
Not a problem. Yeah, very briefly. So obviously I'm from Abram Ward Community Cooperative in Wigan. 3 years ago, we got funding from Power to Change, who basically launched a place-based funding initiative called Empowering Places. So Wigan, Hartlepool, Bradford, Grimsby, Plymouth and Leicester, all got £1 million each. And Power to Change didn't want to just fund local economic partnerships or city centre. They actually wanted to fund neighbourhood, grassroots, bottom-up led initiatives. So we started doing ours in 2014. So we do a neighbourhood plan. The community tell us what they want. And then ultimately we want to change our community and keep people staying in Abram, staying in Wigan, rather than go to Manchester or Liverpool, for example, and grow our community from the bottom up, but via social enterprise and community business. So the funding we've had allowed us to create this thing called Made in Wigan. So the vision is that everyone who lives or works in Wigan has a skill, a talent, a special something. It doesn't matter how old or young, or whether you have a disability or any inequality issue. It's about enabling people to stay in Wigan and ultimately scale up the work they do. So we do everything from community organising through to provide start-up support, and then ultimately the scale up. So for example, we have a men's sheds group. We realise a lot of men in Abram Ward didn't have anywhere to go to. Pubs are shutting down. So we have a number of men who started joining a men's sheds group, and then we've supported them. And until up to lockdown, we managed to actually get Wigan Warriors, the rugby team in Wigan, actually realised that if they were going to start getting wood-based products, so like these rugby ball stands for when you have like VIP lounges for prizes, Wigan Warrior will start buying the wood-based stuff off men's shed. So it's all part of this bigger local wealth building work that we're working on with Wigan Council, but it's just ensuring that Wigan Council are there to enable and co-design this this wealth building agenda. But we're now testing it in Abram Ward, and then we're at that phase now where we're now trying to take this out to the various parts of Wigan. But each area will be different, which I think is key. You know, Abram Ward, Springfield are two different places, about 5 miles are we roughly apart, Angela?
Yeah, we are. And we're just connecting now, aren't we? And looking at how we can grow community power together, you know, so that we can really get alongside the council and have some genuine co-production. Yeah. So thanks, Dave. Thank you for that. And I'd like to introduce Debbie. I think Debbie's going to speak next.
If we remember to unmute myself, okay? Can you hear me okay? I'm not muted, okay? Like Angela and Jill, thanks for inviting me along, but also as well, I edited Angela's letter and popped that through to my neighbours and had the same impact. There's nothing that we don't exchange, share now, and I couldn't imagine living where I actually live without being connected to my neighbours. So it's not just in Wigan, it's happened in Liverpool as well. But I'm not here today to talk about where I live. I'm here to talk about Netherton, which is a community that I work in, but it's my second home because I've been here nearly 19 years as part of the L30 Community Centre. I just want a quick minute to put it into context is that 22 years ago, a charity was set up as part of a regeneration programme called Fun for Kids to provide out-of-school provision in the local area. And we rented office space within the Alfeta Community Centre, as well as running some of our childcare from there. The community centre at the time was run by the local community, as it should be, but there was nobody alongside them to sort of support in funding and systems. And slowly over time, the building was in a lot of disrepair. It was very hard to manage, and the council basically came along and said, right, we're going to close this building. And that's where at the time Kids stepped in and said, well, we don't want to see the building closed, we'll take on the management for the time being and see where that takes us. What we then did was we got some lottery funding in 2011 for 5 years to develop it as a community centre again. But looking back now and learning from where we are today, it was a very much to-do approach. We had a community centre manager, we were putting on courses for people, and it was only 5 years later when we came to evaluate that we noticed that, as I say, I've been here nearly 19 years and seen a lot of money come into the area, but nothing was really changing for local people. And the things that were making the difference in the community centre were those groups that had been established through people connecting and that had lasted, because it wasn't a case of a programme coming along, putting on a six-week course, a year course, funding ends and off they go and the community are back to square one. These were groups such as photography club, a craft class, where local people had come together because of their shared interests and skills and talents and wanted to develop something themselves. So that formed the basis of a further lottery bid to take on that asset-based community development approach. And I think it's Angela doing the slides, okay? Yeah. So what we've been doing, I'll give you a thumbs up each time we need to change. So what we've been doing over the past 3 years is sort of identifying those people within the community that are wanting to connect with others, and I've already got that established with their neighbours, but wanting to develop that further, and also talking to people about their skills and their talents and how they connect together and also use local assets. There's 3 of the questions that we've been asking is sort of what can the community do itself, what does the community need support to do, and what does the community need others to do, to make sure that things are community led. And really the period of this pandemic, that's not changed, and the only thing we've seen differently is that the community have really stepped up now with very little of needing support or others to do for them. Because what we found is that a lot of times where the community might have gone and said, oh, we need somebody to do this for us, those people are actually working from home and they weren't around. So the community like, no, we can do this ourselves. And at the community centre, we've been very much alongside the community throughout this whole, is it be 3 months, 4 months? Does everybody else feel like every day and every week just blends into one now? We've totally lost track. So we started off by, similar to what Angela and Jill did, we sort of put out there to the community the idea of keeping things local within your street. We shared the idea of the letter to your neighbours. We made them available to people so they could pick up a batch. We photocopy them and they could go out and do that. We then entered lockdown and we gathered some of the connectors, you can see our little Zoom there, to start to have a chat of really what are some of the ideas, how we can keep our community connected, because we were already hearing, this was 2 weeks into lockdown, how people were really struggling, being isolated and coming across, living a different way of life. So one of the things, the first thing that came up, and we've got some Easter bunnies there, is every year Boots the Chemist kindly donate a couple of 100 Easter eggs to the community centre. We said, well, let's get out there in a fun way and see how people are doing. And that's where the costumes came on. And we basically went out into the streets with music playing, told people to be on the doorsteps, and the bunny would leave an egg. But that also gave a chance for others to come alongside us and sort of identify where people were struggling and what was needed. And to be honest, we never expected the response that we got from just those bunnies dancing on the street, how much people said it raised their spirits. It made them feel better. It got them talking to their neighbours over the fence. And it's like, we got together again to find, how can we build on this? And this is where we go to Suey's street exercise. So Suey was out with the Easter bunnies. Suey, before the pandemic, was in the centre 3 or 4 times a week delivering yoga and fitness classes. She lives on the same street as the centre. She's lived here all her life, and she's one of those people that we've all got in our communities who knows everybody. A fantastic person, amazing energy, and just a way where she can get alongside anyone. So what we thought about was, how can Sue use her skills in the current situation we find ourselves in? And that's where we've decided street exercise. We got some funding from L30 Million because we're a big local area. And so we then put out on Facebook, if you'd like Sue to come along to your street for 20 minutes each week to do some exercise, nominate yourselves. The only sort of thing we need in place is that you've got 10 neighbours who are prepared to get on their doorsteps and do it with you too. We were inundated with streets, and over this time, Sue, since about the third, have I gone? Am I still here?
Yeah.
I'm still here, sorry. Since about the third or fourth week in lockdown, Sue's been out on the streets every week, covering 16 streets and over 250 people taking part. And not only people taking part on their doorsteps and become fitter, they've got to know their neighbours. People who are shields and have been doing it behind their windows. People are on their doorsteps talking to others over the fence. And we've included there some of the comments that we had on Facebook from the impact that this has made. And there's so many more that we could pop on there. And it's worth noting that so many of these people that were taking part were not people that would have normally taken part in exercise. We sent along a couple of characters too, so it was a bit of fun, and people of all ages could join in. This is something now that people are talking about. How can we make this continue? How can we carry on staying fit and healthy where we live? And they're the discussions that we're starting to have now with the community, with commissioners, with the L30 Million and with Sue, because it's totally changed her life and she wants to commit to doing this long term. At the bottom of this screen, there's a link to Sue's story, because what we've also been doing in this time is telling the community's story, and she's a real inspiration for anybody else looking to do this. Another way that we've been people connected within the community is through the Scrub Hub, and this has been one of the ways that those many people who have been asked to shield and were labelled vulnerable by the government have actually proved that they are still valuable community members. So as we entered the pandemic, we all saw in the news the shortage of PPE and how local hospitals, care homes, everyone was struggling for the basic equipment they needed. So we put out there, who wants to be part of a Scrub Hub? Within a week, we had a team of 18 sewers. We had donations of material every day, continuously. We actually at one point wondered, did anybody in Netherton have any bedding left on their beds? And we started off by making the scrub bags, the headbands, and then when we were able to access material, because material and elastic was so short of supply, we actually started to make the scrubs as well. To date, they've made over 500 scrub bags, 600 headbands, over 60 sets of scrubs, and even just this weekend I picked up another 200 face coverings, which we're now giving out to the community free. So not only were these people who were shielding taking part in something, we were also, as well as with the Busy Bees, having lots of doorstep chats. The Busy Bees links into the Scrub Hub a bit, in that it was an idea that one of the community members brought us a lovely gift of a knitted bee in a little pouch with some sunflower seeds. And we thought, right, this is something nice that we could share with our neighbours. So we just popped it on Facebook. Who wants to get knitting? Let's share these. Again, within a short amount of time, we had 9 knitters. They knitted over 500 bees. We popped them in little envelopes with sunflower bee seeds and a lovely poem. We sort of charted the development of these on Facebook, to then when we were ready to go out into the community dressed as Bill and Ben, and these are community members that went out and did this, Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse, everybody was looking out on their streets to see if they would be gifted a bee from the community. Again, this is just a way of those doorstep chats with people who are shielding, feeling as though they're really still contributing to their community, and also linking them with others. We've also, in this town, we've been so overwhelmed by the kindness in the community. Angela referred to before her Hungry Hippos blog, which refers to, at the time, everybody sort of going for emergency support and looking at what we could do. we sort of stepped back, and at one point I did think, should I be writing a funding bid to get money to do food hampers? But what we've actually seen is we didn't need to do that, and it was right not to, because over this time we've supported hundreds of people who have needed that extra bit of support during this time. But it's not come from us as a community centre. We've just been a distribution centre and somewhere for it to all come. It's been the community that have done that. They've fed each other, as in if people have got additional, they've been able to bring it along. Local businesses have shared their resources. The shielding boxes, a lot of people are saying there's only so many beans and pasta I can have in my cupboard. Will you come and pick it up from me this week? And we recycled them. And in this whole time, we've only actually spent just over £300 on additional supplies that we've needed. And to be honest, they've tended to be toiletries. And that's where we've all shared our resources. We've had lots of swapping on doorsteps. And then finally, it's all been about keeping in touch. And again, we've just been alongside the community so we can share younger people writing to older people within our local care homes, younger people going along and visiting, doing doorstep visits for people who are shielding. We've also held regular coffee morning Zooms where people have shared ideas. One of the ideas she shared was about making the local community garden somewhere that people could book who were a bit nervous about coming back out into the community. So yeah, just keeping alongside. We've totally been alongside the community during this time, but we've only been here to provide the ideas, share the ideas and provide that support if and when it's needed, really. And that's where I'm going to sort of pass on to Chris as somebody in the community centre who's then taken those ideas out into the community.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Dev. It's some pretty hard acts to follow there, but can I give you the kind of background on the Netherton Community to start with? The slide that you can see was the very first community meeting that we held. My day job, which I've done for many years, was working with crime and drugs and rehabilitation, all the kind of problems that lots of communities face. We'd had another fatal shooting and another attempted shooting after that. And I just got to a point one day where I thought, well, I do this in my day job all the time. And then I go home to my own community and switch off. You know, and if we can make a difference elsewhere around the UK, surely I can do the same in my own community. And just put a post up, you know, enough's enough. Who fancies getting involved? And the response we got back was amazing. Like I say, I mean, you'll see the kind of first slide there, the amount of people that turned up. And it was one of the things that struck me about Netherton as a community. You know, when we have crisis, when we have challenges, what good communities do is they respond really well to stuff like that. And you know, it actually, in an odd way, it gives them a bit of a sense of purpose. And then from there, I think it is just about, you know, how do we keep people together? How do we keep people talking? The group itself now, I think we're on about 3,000 members, 31,000 interactions on the Facebook page just in the last 28 days. It really has become a kind of way for people across Netherton to connect. Can we have another slide though, Angela? Just some of the things that we've done. I mean, very early on, you know, we decided early on that we're going to do as much as we can for ourselves without relying on services. And it goes back to some of that kind of permission stuff. You know, about this time last year, we tried to run it was just a picnic on the field, and people came together, donated loads of stuff. And the most challenging part of doing a community picnic was trying to get in touch with the council to get them to give us permission to do it, which I found ridiculous, actually. You know, this is the field opposite my house, and I can't get you to say it's okay for me to go on it with my neighbours. I found the answer to that, actually. You only have to put a bouncy castle up on it and they turn up out of nowhere, which was great. Be amazed how quick the phone rings. But, you know, we went on, and I suppose when when the pandemic struck, you know, we were already well placed. You know, we had lots of people connected, and I think all we needed to do from that point was put some ideas out there. We've done the mascots as a kind of moving on from the Easter bunnies, and it was just me and a group of local people, most of which I'd never met before actually. It just said, that looks great, can I get involved? And we went out and it kind of almost gave people a purpose, got them to realise that, you can be involved in the community, you can go out and, because we're talking passing out bags of sweets to kids, and I think we got past the kind of fear factor of, look, there's a lot of us getting involved in doing this, we're doing it safely, we're making a real difference to people, and it's another one of the things where we don't need permission to do it. This is just us doing what we know is right for the community. I've lost count of the number of street bingos and stuff that happen. These are people that, they don't want to be sat in pubs and stuff. They want to actually be mixing with the neighbours and doing fun stuff like we used to do. And I think, that's one of the other important things. We're going back to a kind of almost older way of doing things where we're looking after each other. We're checking in on neighbours who, I think even after just a couple of weeks of lockdown, people were desperate to talk. And I think all it did was allow us the opportunity to get out there and kind of start them conversations. Probably the best bit of recycling that we've done was the VE Day celebrations, where we found in an old guy's loft all of the Union Jacks he had from the Silver Jubilee, which was it was a hidden gem. And it just allowed us to really go get out there and decorate the streets and help people celebrate VE Day. We've had people going around putting, you probably see it in the middle, in the centre picture, just putting little plaques up on trees around the parks, just for kids to go around and kind of find the hidden plaques and stuff. Can we move it on a little bit, Angela? Yeah, I mean, again, some of the issues that there was a couple of lads robbed on the canal, quite a serious attack. One of them required quite a few stitches, and he was thrown in the canal after being robbed of most of his possessions. And the community again just came together on it. We set a target of £500 on a GoFundMe page, which we raised really easily. And then came to get the money out and found out that GoFundMe want to take 80-something quid out of it just for the pleasure of helping us with it. So we went old school again. We went back to the old ways of doing it. We started doing raffles with actual tickets and nobody doing it for us. Just, working on trust, giving people books of raffle tickets, getting them out there and selling them out. And we raised way over what we needed to do, all just on local donations. It mentions in the bottom, it's as if services expect us to struggle, and people most definitely have struggled, but not half as much as I think services expected. I mean, the services for me, they were almost invisible for a long time, and we're at the point now where services are starting to kind of creep back in. And there's a lot of feeling out there. We've done okay without you in a really difficult time. We haven't done okay. We've thrived without you, because people are starting to realise, this is actually, it's not about kind of taking a back seat on the bus and waiting to see where we get taken. It's about actually taking control of that and leading where we're going in the future. We don't need services to direct us in what's right. Can we move it on a little bit again, Angela? Yeah, I mean, I love that first bit. The community's noticed who's been around and supported us and who hasn't. The local community centre, L30, where you heard from Debbie before, it's been central to so much of the stuff. Even just the fact that we've got a community centre there that's able to really start working with local streets. And that is just something that we need to develop further. And I think taking back control of where money is spent in the community. We met with the council, the community head of communities for the council rather. And it was lovely that they kind of stepped back in after all this time to talk to us. But it was just as odd that as we kind of talked about what we were doing, and you know, they kind of almost offered to keep doing their thing, and you know, we want. It was odd that we talked about the stuff that we wanted to happen, the things that we wanted to be doing, and they talked about the stuff that was already going on, and how they try and work with us to make sure their stuff doesn't get in the way. You know, the council stuff doesn't get in the way of our community stuff, which is what it's odd. You know, if you want a timetable for events, surely you should be asking us what we should be doing, not kind of doing it for us again. You know, the opportunities that we've got to make real changes in how things are done, you know, for me is massive. You know, and I think it is just about empowering even more people now to take ownership of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's it for slides, isn't it, Angela?
Yeah, that's it. We've done. Yeah. And you are a big local area, so there are lots of opportunities. You've not really been involved so much so far in the way that you could be. So
you know what? I do think it's important that, you know, what we've achieved to date, you know, I could talk endlessly for all of these things that we've done around the community. You know, it really could go on forever about lots of the little stuff and how it has such a big impact. But, you know, we've done it to date with nothing, you know, and I mean nothing, you know, little bits of, you know, we're talking pounds, not hundreds of pounds, and the community's made it happen for itself.
Well, can I say thanks to everyone for starters? Just that was amazing set of stories, but also deeper insights exactly about this idea of neighbourhood democracy. And that last bit of conversation is exactly, I think, what we're interested in pursuing. How can we get this relationship to work right, where the assumption is that it's local people who should have power and authority, not that they somehow have to ask permission to occupy their own bit of grass or their own street, or all of those things you were mentioning, Chris, are perfect examples of some of the challenges I think ahead of us, but also that the way you've managed to at least begin to tackle that. So, and I think for the Neighbourhood Democracy Project, the only other thing I'd want to say is I really hope that for Springfield and for Netherton, whether through us or in whatever emerges, because I think a lot of people thinking about this now, we can stay connected, because I think some of the power for pushing back and for renegotiating this relationship with local government and central government will come from our power and our ability to get organised collectively. It's my experience is that's what allows us to maybe get a bit deeper with some of this. But those are just some of my observations. There's some great questions in the chat bar, which in a way you were already starting to get into. And I wanted to just pick up one question that was asked, and then that will probably lead us into the other stuff. But who was it was asking about, I think it was Gord was asking, are you still there, Gord, from Canada? All right, yes. Gord, would you like to just ask your question? Because I think that was an issue that was touched on, but maybe would be worth just pushing a little bit further.
Yeah, sure. So full disclosure, I come from a social service organization, but we've been trying for the last decade to pivot our roles away from providing support or expertise to how do we catalyze the capacity that's available in the community, and how do we connect people and contribute to kind of building a more resilient neighborhood and community, and less dependent on expertise. It's because, of course, it's not good. And so for the last several years, we've been trying different things. And one of the things we really struggle with, and so this is the question, is when we have used asset-based community development, or when we use a series of different kinds of invitations for people to come in and get to know neighbors or participate in neighborhood activities, they tend to be of a certain sort of folks that they're all ready to lean in. They don't require a whole lot to come in. And the piece that we're really wondering about is like where the other voice is. So it's really hard. We struggle a lot more for immigrants and refugees where English might be a second language, or for seniors who have tech or mobility issues, or where social anxiety and people are reluctant to kind of engage in local neighborhood, or people with intellectual disabilities and their families, or you know, there's a whole sort of segment of people that are often left out of these attempts to organize. And it's really much more difficult to reach them and to kind of figure out how to pull them in, or how to be a support to them, or how to stitch them into this resilient fabric that's getting built. So I'm just wondering if anyone has some ideas or some strategies or things that their conversation, something that might help with that.
Angela, do you want to kick off, and you might point to others, but I mean, does that even feel true given what we've been through in this? Or if it is true, was there intentional challenge or opportunity here?
You can always do more, can't you? But I think I think that in Springfield, I know that we've kind of really gone out of our way to try and invite in as many different types of people that we can. And I think if there was one thing that I've observed from like being welcomed and invited into the Netherton story, the way that the street fitness and the mascots did that just kind of was really, really inclusive on every street level, because it was through fun and not label, and not in, you know, it was kind of come and join the party. People like parties.
So that's something about, in a way, quite a direct, upfront, fun, inclusive design. It's not a fancy community development initiative. It's let's have fun on our streets, kind of. Yeah. What about Deborah or Chris or Jill? Does Chris?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the include, you know, I'm always quite proud of Netherton in that, you know, we I'm not saying we don't have problems with inclusion and that, but we're quite social given the opportunity. You come along to a street bingo and you'll figure that out. But I think all of the kind of street events that you do when we're out there and we're talking to people, you know, we're uncovering more and more all the time about kind of how we reach people, you know, and importantly, you know, where there is barriers, you know, if you look at the kind of charity, the fundraising for charity stuff that we've done, and you know, to reach out and say to people, we're here to support you. You know, it's a fabulous way of engaging with people. But I think more importantly, you know, the more of it we do on the streets, the more we figure out where those gaps are, where are the people that we're missing, you know, and because if you put pride back into communities, you know, one of the knock-on effects is people want to go and talk to other people about it. If you give them some of that ownership and you know, Angela, yeah.
I was just wondering, I've got a 40-second video of Wham! If on the streets exercise, if you want me to just play that.
Yeah.
I think that kind of demonstrates it.
How can you turn down Wham?
Yeah, Wham!
Have you not got the dancing mascots as well, Angela?
No, I've not, because you've not sent me any of those. These are what I've kind of got from Rena.
Okay.
So I haven't got the... but this was at the very beginning of it. This is just the first week.
Brilliant. Thank you, Angela. I'm gonna shift to, I think some of the other questions are all a bit interconnected, and they were the thing we were talking about. So I'm just going to we're kind of a bit over time, but this is such an important conversation. I mean, I'm just going to run it as long as people can bear for a bit. But so I think those questions were, you can see them in the chat, but they were very much about how can we build a better sustainable relationship between, as it were, the state or the services that have typically taken a lot of power and control over these things, and this emerging community action and neighbourhood awareness. So maybe, I mean, people might want to come in who've asked even these questions, but maybe Angela, again, could you just pick up, and you might want to point to people or things, but this is obviously something you're very aware of.
How do we do it? Yeah, well, that kind of, we just have to keep knocking on the door, don't we? Because we know we had the meeting in Netherton last week with the head of communities, and a different step of the ladder than where we are. But we're kind of just going to have to keep going together. And I think we need, and the same in Wigan too, you know, because the difficulty in my town is, my town has got the deal, and so the mutual stuff and the neighbourhood stuff, it doesn't feel like it's got a bit of a home. So it's about how we carry on doing what we're doing with this kind of background support with us, because it's power stuff, isn't it? It's power stuff, and people don't like to let go of power.
So any thoughts, or just a way of amplifying the question, really? I mean, in a way, this is the fundamental purpose of the Neighbourhood Democracy Project, is to try and work out a strategy that accelerates our capacity to get power back into neighbourhoods. Even these webinars are part of that, getting people talking about it and recognise it as a good thing.
Just doing it.
Just doing it.
Can I just say?
Yeah, sure.
I think, in a way, it's all about just connecting, and as simple as it is, and it's about kind of going outside of your comfort zone. And we had a conversation about this the other day, Angela, didn't we? And I'm not somebody that goes on holiday and likes to make lots of friends, but I do love talking to people. So I've had to, I remember saying, I made a conscious effort to start a conversation in the queue for the chemist, and it was outside my comfort zone, and it was great, and everybody got involved with the conversation, and that was exactly how I felt before I pushed those leaflets through the door. You know, it's putting yourself out there a little bit, and I think as every week that passes, we're connecting with more and more people that are kind of adding to it and giving us more flavour about, most people feel like this. We just need to tap into that conversation with them, and then, as Chris said, more and more just develops and just strengthens, but it's got to come from those connections, and whatever we can do to enhance those, the better.
Yeah.
One of the things that I suppose that I've been working with support providers, organisations that I think Gord was talking about. One of the things I've been encouraging people to think about is just flipping this round. Instead of saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if the community welcomed you, or how do you get involved in the community, is, and I think this comes through in the stories a lot, is how do you take responsibility for acting your citizenship into that community? How do you actually contribute to the community? Make that kind of your number one obligation. And some of that's just about courage, isn't it? It's about flipping it round and saying, I'm a citizen, and the world, I have a place, I have something to give. And I think it's activating that at some level, isn't it? It is a personal thing, as well as we can talk about structures and systems and funding. Ultimately, that little bit of courage to talk to somebody in a queue at the chemist's is a personal inner thing that only you can exercise that, can't you? So I think one of the things we have to do is, in a way, strip away some of the mystique here and just say, this is stuff human beings built to do, but you have to step into it. You have to take a bit of courage and do it. Just do it. Yeah.
And as Jill said, you kind of got to be connected to do that, haven't you? So that's kind of what we're trying to just do in Springfield at the minute, is just connect people through shared interests so that they begin to grow that.
Sam's put his spoon up.
Spoon. That was brilliant. Really enjoyed that. One of the things that really sort of stood out for me right at the start was the importance of an invitation from a neighbour. And I think that's the kind of the real critical thing. And I think that's the challenge for organisations and institutions. So myself as a neighbour in a WhatsApp group in my street, where a lot of what was being talked about really resonates. As soon as I put on my work for the council community enabling team hat on and go to another neighbourhood, it's this massive challenge because I'm not a neighbour and never will be. So I think that's the kind of the challenge for organisations, institutions, is to try and do that kind of bridging piece with communities so that you can form that relationship. Because I know if I said to my neighbours and the WhatsApp group here and all the things we're doing is like, how would we like the council to approach us and talk to us? We'd have a list. But I think if I went and then took that list, but this is authentic and organic, and then applied it, I would still have but you're from the council. And it's always that's the challenge, I think. I don't know what the perfect solution is, and we try it at lots of different angles, but I think because the importance is the invitation from the neighbour, I think that's a kind of a crux of the challenge.
There was a question, or Kate had kind of said about Kate, I think that question from Kate about what role you would like your head of communities to play might be worth a bit of thought. But Bob, you come in and then maybe I can encourage the others to think about that. Need to unmute.
If I unmute, I will be ever so brief. It just occurs to me, we're asking this question about how do we get our institutions to change their relationship with us. Essentially, it feels to me this is not dissimilar to the stuff we do, getting our institutions to actually recognise the needs of people, with severe disabilities or whatever, to be included. It's having the debate with them in front of everybody else. It's about asking those Socratic questions about what really matters and how can they support us to work towards what really matters in a public place. If we do this privately, they'll carry on doing their own damn thing. But the more often that we can have that conversation openly with everybody taking part, particularly amongst people who have taken control in their own communities to a large extent and can see the difference, that the more chance that at least in some places this stuff will become mainstream rather than the candles that flicker on and off. And we've long experience of those candles going out.
Thanks, Bob. Any thoughts on that, or on, let's say, this question of, like if you could write the job description of the head of communities, what would that say? That comes from somebody who is a kind of head of communities or something like that.
Yeah, I'm very much inviting you guys to write my revised job description if you want to. It's just I don't live in Wigan.
Do you live in the community in which you're? Do you? I don't think, I mean, this is personal, but I don't think a job description should be a head of communities, because that to me, that's the first thing that you're saying, is that there's a hierarchy. Well, that's just my opinion.
Love that, because I had that exact conversation with a business this morning, that they shouldn't be defining what a community is.
Yeah. It's an interesting job title to begin with, isn't it, Jill? Yeah. Well spotted, yeah.
I'm sure Angela could email you a few bits and pieces to add to it.
Well, is there anything anybody... So the chat is, I'm going to keep a record of the chat. There's some really interesting questions. I'll try and put some of those things up when we record put the webinar slides on live. And Angela, if you could share the slides as well, I'll put those up on the same web page. Is there anything anybody's desperate to say or ask or do? Martin?
Yeah, another question. Are we any closer to knowing what the division of responsibilities might be between the local authority and the neighbourhood?
Again, Angela, do you feel you want to come back on that?
I think, well, I've got two hats. I've got where I live, and I think Wigan does a lot of good stuff already, but they are open. And in fact, I've got a conversation with the Deputy Chief Exec and the head of the Integrated Care Organisation on Friday to begin looking at kind of some of those conversations. And then in Netherton, kind of, as we said, we have engaged and invited the head of communities into community space, and we kind of had a very open and honest conversation about how we think we'll probably have to get through some stormy water to get to where we want to be, and how actually that neighbourhood in Netherton has got possibly more opportunities than other areas because it's got another 4 or 5 years of big local attached to it. But the next step is about bringing together all the local institutions, and they're going to facilitate that for us because the community kind of wants to open the assets more. You know, it's asking questions like, we're paying £120,000 for a community garden that's open 2 till 4 on a Thursday. Surely we could do that ourselves. And it's asking questions like, you know, what Sue's just been doing really is social prescribing. So can we have that resource too, please? You know, so I think for me, Netherton feels much closer to that than where I live in my little neighbourhood, but that's been intentionally developing for a number of years.
Yeah, I mean, for me with Netherton, you know, I think one of the things, especially the pandemic, has proved that, you know, if services disappeared tomorrow, we'd probably be okay on our own. But you'd have to stop taking money out of the area. And start some investment back into it.
I mean, there are some things you want services to do for you, isn't there? You know, you want to start your policing, you know, there are things, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do. I think you've done a lot of social work over this pandemic, haven't you? You've done a lot of social work in your community.
I think the more integrated we are into that kind of day-to-day community work and, you know, doing things for ourselves, you know, what you see is the kind of knock-on effect of that is that the cost for your frontline services become much less.
Yeah.
You know, it's a kind of really good working business model that the more we do for ourselves, the less crises we see, and the less investment we need from our council. You know, it allows them to take a kind of backseat on it almost.
Yeah,
and properly fund the services that need it.
And like sitting in Wigan, I would say our local authority overreached during the pandemic, and like Sefton, they just didn't really turn up, did they? You know, so somewhere around is a nice middle balance. You know, that kind of where people fit together and work together.
There's also an interesting question of the transparency of what is going on with the money, as Chris mentions. I mean, actually, when you analyse it, usually where the money is being spent is not in the places that the system says has the greatest need either. So there's always this kind of strange paternalism where, you know, certain areas are looked down upon and people say, well, these places can't do anything for themselves. But if you actually analyse where the money is, it's all off in a teaching hospital or in the wealthy part of town. Or it's not actually where the need is. But there's no way of having that conversation, is there, even? And so you have got a kind of, often a kind of paternalistic theft going on, where actually you're extracting money. And one of the things that the COVID crisis has done, I think, Angela, you mentioned this, is people, because a lot more people are at home, suddenly you realise your assets are your people. like there's talents there that actually those people were out serving the interests of middle class people or services that weren't serving the community that they're from as well. So you can map where people are, and it suddenly gives you a different view of what's going on. Because I don't think we're even near the beginning of a decent conversation about how the public purse is used. There's so much sleight of hand going on, where money is being misplaced to the wrong people, the wrong services, and you know, with a government at the moment which is just doing kind of acts of extreme corruption. But you've got the same kind of systemic corruption actually in our whole welfare state. We notice in Sheffield, by analysing public spending, there's 1.5 billion missing compared to the average public spending. And that's true across the whole of the north, as far as I can work it out. The places that you would think have the biggest need have just got money missing from it, but it never comes up in the conversation. So I think this idea of having the conversations, Bob says, in public, but also bringing the facts to bear more transparently, will change the conversation. So I think we're going to have to do quite a few basic things before we can answer Martin's question, because I don't think we understand where we are, really, what we've got, or what our assets really are available to us. Right, you've borne with that. We're like 20 minutes over. The quality of the conversation's been brilliant, but maybe I will call it to close, because I think just we can always revisit this, and we will. The webinar series will begin again in September. We're going to take a kind of a summer break now, and again, if you want to get involved in the project and you're not involved at the moment, please just let me know, and we're just keeping this going because it feels like the most important thing that the Centre for Welfare Reform can do is help figure out a strategy around this. It's an area where there's a lot of interest at the moment, but I think also a lot of confusion and a lot of questions. But we'll just plough on and work with anybody who wants to work on these things. Real gratitude again to Angela, to Chris, to Jill, to David. Been superb, really powerful, and I'm sure anybody coming to this recording will really benefit from understanding just all the creativity that was just lying underneath the surface that you've brought to life so well and illustrated so well for us. So a big thank you. And, yeah, Angela, is there anything last you want to say?
I just wanted to say thanks to Debbie as well.
Oh, Debbie, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for coming, you know, and telling the story rather than me telling your story for you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Cheers. Thank you.